the ancient stone ruins of southern Africa is really the evidence that we're looking for. Often called cattle kraal, of little historic value. That's unfortunately the ignorance and often the arrogance of our archaeologists and historians here in southern Africa. But the ancient stone ruins are unquestionably the fingerprints and the evidence of this vast gold mining empire of the Anunnaki that was left behind. These are just some aerial images of these stone circles. What's important to note is that each of these stone circles is completely unique. They're all circular, they all have their absolute unique shape, and they're all connected to each other. They're not standalone. They're all connected to each other by these channels. They look like pathways. I call them channels. And they're all surrounded by what looks like a giant spider's web that holds them all together. So when you see them alone like this in photographs, look around them. Look at the stuff around it, and you realize it continues. The walls and the ruins do not end with the stone circle itself. It goes out further away from it. They're all connected in a giant grid. And then we get some beautiful flower-shaped ruins like this, that you can see the channel, that little, looks like a pathway running out of it, and that channel connects to a bigger channel that runs up this picture away from us. And these flower-shaped ruins very clearly indicate a very advanced understanding of the laws of nature, which I'm going to come back to, and advanced technology. But clearly you can also see sacred geometry emerge from studying these structures. And once we realize what these stone circles are and how they were formed and why they have these specific shapes, we understand very clearly why the sacred geometric patterns are encoded in the walls of these stone circle ruins. Remember, each one is completely unique. No two stone circles are the same. And this is an example of these channels, and like I said, these pathways or wires that connect them together. And also notice that spider's web effect that goes away out of that stone circle. And just more examples of the channels. You can clearly see this is so badly eroded that when you walk on the ground, you'd be walking over these and you won't even know that you're walking on ancient ruins. And this is part of the problem, because people just ignore it, they don't recognize it, and our researchers and our academics do not explore it or research it. This is so old, and you can also see the erosion and the destruction. You can see the effect of water, moving water across them. I've just given you a very important bit of evidence to determine the date of these ruins and the age of these ruins. You can see the channel there running. Around that channel, what you do not see in this picture is that there are lots of stone circles and many of the terraces that cover mountains and mountains. So this is one of the best examples of the density of these structures. It is just incredible. We could not recreate this today. With all the engineers in the world today, we could not recreate this. This is just an engineering construction achievement on a scale that is unimaginable to us. Stone circles connected to each other. 450,000 square kilometers of agricultural terraces. Large areas of South Africa and Zimbabwe are covered in these agricultural terraces. And once your eyes open and you're sensitized to it, you start seeing it everywhere. Everywhere you drive, the mountains, Google Earth, you start realizing it, recognizing it. This is just a lovely picture up the road from me. I'm right in the middle of it. I'm sitting right in the middle of it as I speak. So this is literally all around us. This is the top of the hill or the small mountain. And keep in mind that the important thing about these stone structures is that they have no doors and entrances. This was already determined in 1939, was the first time that the archaeologists, when they explored some of the stone circles in my area here, wrote this elaborate research report where they make it very clear. The original structures have no doors and entrances. So from that moment on, we have to conclude that these were not built as dwellings for people or cows, that they were built for very different reasons. So again, we see archaeological drawings, these are from 1939, that show us the stone circles connected to each other. All are connected. They're not standalone structures. Here they don't show you the two walls of the channels. They actually just draw one line, but those are actually two walls. Here they show them connected to each other, and here the stone circles have concentric walls without any doors and entrances. So clearly these were not dwellings for people or cows. They were something very, very different. Where is the flagship among all these ancient ruins in southern Africa? And undoubtedly the flagship is Adam's Calendar. Adam's Calendar has become possibly one of the most important ancient sites discovered on Earth. It is, in my research right now, the oldest known sundial or megalithic sun calendar available to us today, or known to us today. And it dates back to possibly around 300,000 years, and I'm going to show you why a little bit later. So it is the oldest working megalithic sun calendar on Earth today. This is the guy that rediscovered it in 2003, Johann Heine, and he is the guy that we have to be grateful for having his eyes open, seeing it from a helicopter, realizing that this is not just a rock formation. This is a consciously constructed site, and he went back and researched it and just made all the discoveries, the alignments, north, south, east, west, and the fact that the one stone cast a shadow, turning the other stone into a calendar. Here you can see the shadow in this photograph, and that shadow moves from the left edge, which is the summer solstice, and as the sun moves, the shadow moves to your right, and when that shadow hits the right edge of that calendar stone, it's the end of that season, and we reach the winter solstice, and this shadow then starts to move back to give you a one whole year cycle. So it is a spectacular site, and Johann Heine discovered this. He did all the measurements, and is an absolutely spectacular discovery. This is what the site looks like from a helicopter. You can see it's perched right on the edge of a mountain. That edge drops about 200 meters and eventually goes about 700 or 800 meters into the valley, that whole big Barberton Valley that you see in front of Adam's Calendar, and that goes about 30 kilometers across. So it is right on the edge of a cliff. It was originally a circular structure. That tree on the right is north. That's where the north marker stone is, and under the tree on the left is the south marker stone, and the north-south line runs right between the two calendar stones that you find at the center of Adam's Calendar. It's fascinating that African shaman Baba Credo Mutwa was initiated at this ancient site in 1937. When I first met Credo Mutwa in 2008, and I showed him the Adam's Calendar book shortly after I published it, he started to weep and with joy, and he told me about he never thought he would see that special place again, because no one had photographs of it until then. So the photographs he saw in the Adam's Calendar book was the first time he saw it since he was initiated there. He says that that African shamans and knowledge keepers have been holding ceremony there for thousands of years. He explained to me how the ceremony would take place, what would happen, and what would happen during the ceremonies and why the ceremonies were taking place. He also told me that under the tree at the stone altar, an important ancient African king is buried. And again, that is a whole other story that I can't go into in this lecture here today. He calls it Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods to be the slaves in the gold mines. That's as clear as Baba Credo Mutwa makes that story. Humanity was created by the Anunnaki at Adam's Calendar to be the slaves in the gold mines. That is not the main reason why the calendar was built, but is one of the areas or places that some of the research and the genetic manipulation may have taken place. A very deep story, once again, in other lectures that you can get on my channel. There are many, many fascinating things about Adam's calendar, and one of them is the connection to Orion. Just like many other ancient sites in Egypt, all over the Americas and in Asia, so many connections to Orion and other constellations, and Orion seems to be one of the favorite ones. And Adam's calendar is no exception. Once again, the 3 stones that lie just to the right when you're looking east, so in other words just south of the Horus stone that marks the rise of the sun, the 3 stones to the right of the Horus stone are the 3 Orion's belt stones. When we lift them up in a 3D reconstruction, Orion's belt rises right above those stones, and I suspect that it had something to do with orientation, when the site was originally built, and so forth. By 1974, Roger Summers had more technology, more aerial photographs, and he estimated about 20,000 of these ruins. By the year 2007, me, Michael Tellinger, including Revel Mason, the retired head of archaeology at Wits University, my old university where I graduated from medical school in the field of pharmaceutics, Revel Mason told me on the phone that he estimated there are about 100,000 of these ruins. I was very excited because at the time I also thought there were about 100,000 of these ruins, because I walked through about 1,000 of them in 6 months when I first arrived here. So I assumed there must be at least 100 times more than what I walked through. 100,000 ruins. That posed a huge problem for us at the time, because if there were 100,000 ruins built for dwellings for people and animals, that's what we thought in those days, and we allocated just 10 people per stone circle, that gives us a population of 1 million people a long time ago. And clearly at no time in southern African history was there a population that size that occupied this part of the world. So fortunately, now we realize that these are not dwellings for people or animals, so we no longer have to worry about the population problem. So I started to count. I didn't want to just thumbsuck 100,000. I needed a more scientific answer. So I started what I think at this stage remains the most scientific approach to counting the stone circles, because I have not read or heard of anyone else doing this. So at this stage, my scientific, very low scientific attempt at counting the stone ruins of southern Africa remains the most complete. And I counted aerial photographs, the density of the stone circles per hectare, per square kilometer, getting averages, and so forth. So I looked at as many aerial photographs and as many Google shot areas where I found the clusters and the high concentrations of the stone circles. And keep in mind that Google Earth doesn't always show us where it is. If you look today and then you look in 6 months' time, you'll see stone circles where previously you did not see them. It all depends how tall the grass is, or where the sun is, where you see it or not. But by the time I finished counting and my mind was completely blown, I realized that we're dealing with the largest concentration of stone ruins found anywhere on Earth. There are more than 10 million of these structures. Let this sink in for a little while. More than 10 million of these structures. This is an engineering feat of an unimaginable proportion in a time in ancient history that clearly there were no people here, or there must have been people here to do that, and those people simply vanished. And this is why we can talk about a vanished civilization that simply vanished from our history, vanished from our history books. You do not find this in any history book other than the ones that I've written and put out there. You can get them on my website, obviously, and you can get them, download them from Amazon.
First, we have the monkey wrench. This design was to prepare the tools you need for a long journey. That was the message. The wagon wheel design, the message was, it's time to load the wagon or prepare to escape. The bear's paw design told the slaves to take a mountain trail out of view or take the path of the bear. The crossroads design told the slaves that the main crossroad was Cleveland, Ohio. a destination offering several routes to freedom. The bow ties told the slaves to dress in a disguise or put on a change of clothes. The flying geese design was the pattern that told slaves to follow the migrating geese north towards Canada and to freedom. The drunkard's path design told the slaves to create a zigzag path to avoid detection. The North Star instructed slaves to follow the North Star to Canada and to freedom. The log cabin, that is the design that we are using today to create cards, which was used to let slaves know where safe houses were. The symbol could also be drawn on the ground.
Black women once used their hair to draw escape maps in Colombia. In the 1800s, enslaved African women forcibly taken to Colombia would communicate with their communities through braided hair, most importantly for planning escapes. For example, a braided hairstyle called departes, meaning depart in English, would signal that the person wanted to escape. Black women would also record with their braids the obstacles they would encounter on their journeys to help others escape. A river was represented with a braid in the shape of a worm. A bantu knot represented a mountain. And if there were soldiers in any part of the route, they would use really thick braids still known today in the Pacific region of Colombia as tropas, which means troops in English. On top of that, inside the braids, sometimes gold or seeds were hidden to ensure they would survive after they escaped. Because of these escape maps of braids, many Africans were able to escape and form the famous free settlements known as palenques. Some of you may have heard of San Basilio de Palenque, which is one of the first free black towns in the Americas. It's also one of the only remaining palenques in Colombia. It can still be visited if you're in the Cartagena region. Today, this rich history of braids is celebrated every year on May 21st at the Afro hairdressing competitions in Cali, Colombia. May 21st is Afro-Colombian Day, but it also marks the abolition of slavery in Colombia in 1851.